This video is brought to you by hoodbeast.com. Design your own custom hoodies. hoodbeast.com.
Throughout NBA history, there have been many players who have served prison sentences for committing crimes. From small charges such as drug possession to large offenses including robbery and murder, these NBA players have committed crimes that many people have not heard about. With all that being said, today we take a look at 5 NBA players who have been to prison. Welcome to NBA Insider. Before we begin, I would like to give a huge shout out to SeatGeek for sponsoring this video. For those of you who don't know what SeatGeek is, it's basically the smartest way to buy and sell tickets to live events. You can use SeatGeek to find tickets to concerts, Broadway, comedy shows, and even the NBA Finals. SeatGeek searches for tickets all over the web, which means that you'll see far more results and find better deals than if you tried searching on your own, saving you both time and money. To top it off, you guys can use my promo code INSIDER17 to get $20 off your first purchase. Click the link in the description box down below to find out more. Once again, thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring this video. Enjoy! One of the lesser known arrests and convictions in NBA history comes from NBA player Charles Smith. As a star point guard at Georgetown University in the late 1980s, Smith went undrafted in the 1989 NBA draft but still somehow managed to find himself playing for the league. Not to be confused with Charles Smith of the New York Knicks, this Charles Smith was the 1989 Big East Player of the Year. Smith played a total of 73 games in 3 NBA seasons between 1989 and 1995 with the Boston Celtics and the Minnesota Timberwolves. He also played for the 1988 United States men's Olympic basketball team before ending his NBA career to play for a bunch of Canadian and European teams. However, on March 22, 1991, his basketball career officially came to an end when he ran a red light while driving his van, causing him to strike 2 21-year-old Boston University students. As if that wasn't bad enough, the 23-year-old Charles Smith then decided to flee the scene. However, what he failed to realize was that he ended up taking the lives of both the young women. According to a passenger in Smith's car, after running over the 2 people, he paused for a second and then sped away. Police, acting on information provided by witnesses and a taxi driver who followed the vehicle, stopped the van several blocks away and immediately arrested Smith. At the time, they thought he was under the influence of alcohol, but that wasn't the case. Regardless, the following year in 1992, Charles Smith was convicted of vehicle homicide, leaving the scene of an accident, as well as manslaughter, and was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. At the time, the Celtics had signed him to a 10-day contract, and with the news of his arrest, they just let it expire. Charles Smith only ended up serving 28 months of his 4.5-year sentence, and when the 26-year-old was released from prison in July of 1994, the NBA decided to give him a second chance. However, he would only end up playing 8 games with the Minnesota Timberwolves in 1995, and in 2001, his basketball career would come to an end. As if the hit and run was not bad enough, on October 21, 2010, Smith was shot twice in the chest at his home in Bowie, Maryland. Luckily for him, he underwent surgery and survived. However, unfortunately for him, the next day, police discovered a large quantity of cocaine and evidence of a gambling operation while searching his home. Talk about bad luck. Back in the 1990 NBA season, after going undrafted out of St. Mary's University, 6'8" small forward Henry James signed with the Cleveland Cavaliers on a $1 million contract. Throughout his NBA career, he has also played for 6 other cities including Atlanta, Sacramento, Utah, Los Angeles, and Houston. After retiring in 1998, James looked to another means of making money, dealing drugs. Despite this, he was not exactly the smartest drug dealer out there. On September 7, 2006, James was arrested for selling a total of $750 in crack cocaine to an undercover police officer. Prosecutors originally charged him with 2 counts of dealing a controlled substance because they said he dealt crack cocaine twice to undercover detectives. The second time he did it was in a Burger King parking lot with 6 children, 4 of them his, ranging from 3 months to 11 years old. Luckily for him, in March of 2007, the former NBA player who once held the record for most 3-pointers in a single quarter signed a plea agreement admitting to dealing more than 5 grams of crack cocaine, which led to one of his charges being dropped. In the end, James only pleaded guilty to 1 charge of distribution of a controlled substance. However, because of this, a US District Court judge sentenced the 41-year-old to serve 5 years in federal prison. I don't know which one was worse, the fact that he sold drugs to an undercover cop or the fact that he had kids with him when he did. Let me know what you guys guys think in the comments down below. Ex-NBA player Keon Clark supposedly had a bright future in the league, but instead his career only lasted 6 seasons split between 4 teams including the Utah Jazz, Phoenix Suns, and Sacramento Kings. At 23 years old, the former Toronto Raptors power forward became the 13th overall pick in the 1998 NBA draft, the same draft that produced players such as Dirk Nowitzki, Paul Pierce, and Vince Carter. However, after leaving the NBA in 2004, his life took a turn for the worse. That same year, Clark was facing multiple charges including possession of marijuana and illegal weapons. Later in 2013, while he was driving his car, Clark had blacked out at the wheel, hitting a telephone pole, causing his car to flip. It was actually this incident, including weapons possession and driving while under the influence, that led to his arrest. Clark was facing multiple charges and eventually pleaded guilty to 2 charges in 2 separate cases and was given 4 years for each count. In the end, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison. This past summer, after serving 50% of his sentence and showing good behavior, he was released on parole. Despite the fact that his crime is not as interesting as you guys might have been expecting, what makes his situation so unique was the fact that he literally did everything from his crimes off the court to his points on the court while under the influence of alcohol. You see, Keon Clark had a serious addiction. During a court hearing in 2007, he even confessed that he never played a single NBA game while sober. Clark said that he started drinking in high school, and in 1998, after being drafted in the NBA by the Orlando Magic, he began drinking at games during halftime. As a matter of fact, he would drink as much as a half pint to a pint of gin daily. Pretty interesting. Luckily for him, the prison sentence served as an eye-opener. The 42-year-old is currently 5 months sober and is looking to change his life completely around. You gotta give credit where it's due. Former NBA shooting guard Billy Ray Bates spent 4 seasons in the NBA playing for a variety of teams including the Portland Trail Blazers, Washington Bullets, and Los Angeles Lakers. Bates made his NBA debut in 1980 and was named the league's Player of the Week just 1 month later. Despite his somewhat successful career, he played in just 187 NBA games due to drug problems. On January 17, 1988, following his retirement from the league, Bates went to a liquor store, bought a lottery ticket and a half pint of vodka, which he ended up drinking. He then ran into a group of younger kids who had plans of purchasing cocaine, but nobody had the money to buy the drug. Bates suggested the idea of robbing a nearby gas station using a knife, and so he did. During the robbery, he attacked the 18-year-old cash register attendant and used the knife to cut off his ear. Even though Bates denied his involvement, the attack was caught on video and the weapon was found when it fell out of his pocket while he was running away. Police would eventually find him passed out on the lawn just blocks away from the crime scene and with just $7 in his pockets. Yeah, you heard that right. He stole $7. Although Bates said that he never used the weapon, the attendant had to receive multiple stitches to put his ear back. Eventually, Billy was convicted of first-degree aggravated assault and second-degree assault, and in June of 2000, he began serving a sentence that carried a maximum of 10 years and a minimum of 5. Luckily for him, he was paroled in March of 2005 after completing 4 years of his sentence. However, just 18 months later, he violated his parole after testing positive for cocaine, which landed him back in prison for a year and a half before finally being released on March 23rd of 2008. Back in the 1953 NBA draft, 22-year-old Jack Molina was selected as the 3rd overall pick by the Fort Wayne Pistons. In his one and only season in the NBA, the 6'6" player was an all-star small forward. Despite playing 32 somewhat successful games for the Pistons, less than a year into his career, he was banned for life from the NBA. You see, Molina was involved in one of the first issues with gambling in the NBA. What's most interesting to note here was the fact that he had some serious ties with the mafia, which he would use to become involved in a point-shaving scandal where he and his teammates would constantly bet on games. They would specifically gamble on games his team won, and he sometimes even bet against his own team. When the NBA learned of his tactics, he was immediately arrested and banned from the league. You would think that he would have learned his lesson from his first betting experience, but that wasn't the case. With the NBA out of his reach, Molina decided to fix more than basketball. He began cheating in boxing matches by drugging the fighters and even in horse races by shocking the animals using a remote control buzzer. The man was the ultimate finesse. For him, money was the main priority and he was willing to get it by any means. In the early 1960s, after learning about college basketball and the potential amounts of money it could make him, he jumped back into the sport. In 1961, using himself as one of the bookies, Molina got the mafia involved in another point-shaving scandal by bribing players to fix games. This time around, he began using college players for his schemes. When he first began, Jack became the central figure in a gambling ring that at the very least fixed the outcomes of 67 NCAA games involving 49 players from 25 colleges in 18 different states. By the end of his career, 476 players and 43 games were all controlled by Jack and the Mafia. One of his first and most popular victims was future NBA Hall of Famer Connie Hawkins. During the Christmas holidays, Hawkins was extremely broke, so he decided to borrow $250 from Jack Molina with the promise to repay. Of course, Jack gave the $250 to the freshman. Although Molina never encouraged Hawkins to throw games, that's what ended up happening. Despite having no participation or knowledge of fixing games, Connie Hawkins was kicked out of college and barred from the NBA for 8 years. In 1963, despite all of his success with his schemes and scandals, authorities eventually arrested and convicted Jack Molina. He was found guilty of bribing players to fix games from 1957 to 1961. Because of this, he was sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison. In the end, Molina's actions led to the arrests of 37 players across 22 colleges including Columbia, St. John's, New York University, North Carolina State, and Connecticut. Despite all of this, Jack himself only served 5 years of his sentence. Following his release from prison, he returned to his old tricks and even taught himself some new ones, including trafficking in pornography and Taiwanese furs. By 1975, he moved to Hollywood, where his life would become a California cliche. The former basketball star had a comfortable house in the Hollywood Hills and hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was literally living the dream. Unfortunately for him, this dream would come to a tragic end. In the early mornings of August 3rd, 1975, while standing in the backyard of his Hollywood Hills home, the then 43-year-old Jack Molina was struck and killed from a single bullet to his head. Investigators believed that his murder was an assassination sent by the Mafia, but I guess we'll never know.